You know the old line about how the way to a man's heart is through his stomach? Well, it turns out the path to the hearts and stomachs of men and women actually runs through the brain. To put it another way, both food and love are connected, and it's all in your head. Here to tell us more is psychiatrist Dr. Janet Taylor. Good morning to you, doctor.
Good morning, Margaret.
So you're literally saying you can be addicted to love in some way here?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, as you said, we think about love as an affair of the heart and certainly the stomach when you're hungry, but the reality is everything begins and ends right here in the brain.
And how is that? Can you explain it?
Sure. So the way the brain works, obviously, is behaviors, everything, the way we feel all goes through the brain. But the bottom line is you think likes and wants. And the wants start in the brain right here. In the back of the brain, and that's kind of the primary brain. And if you think about evolutionary, that's what when cavemen came out, they had to decide, do I like this? Is it safe or not? So the likes start there, and that starts with dopamine. Dopamine is the pleasure chemical, and that goes to the wants area, and that's the prefrontal cortex, which is right in here. And the cortex is what helps us make the decision about whether we go for what we're doing, the motivation, our goals. So it's all connected. And as much as we'd like to say it's really romantic, even love is goal-oriented.
Does that mean that the brain is processing love the same way it processes an addiction?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the closest things to a cocaine addiction is romantic love. That intense craving, in terms of pathways in the brain and how the brain lights
Really?
up, that intense craving, and think about it with a breakup, how you feel, you know, you're just literally dying to have that person back in your life, and how happy you feel just by a text or a phone call when they respond to you. And so what drugs of addiction do, they work on that same pathway, that dopamine pathway in terms of reward. So it's all about anticipation, anticipating reward. You look at a person you may be attracted to. You look at food, and the anticipation drives the wants to go to the likes, and then the reward, and then the pathway continues over and over.
So how does food then factor in when you've had a bad breakup and you start eating?
Well, you know,
what's going on?
And eating in response to a bad breakup may be more of a habit, and certainly it feeds the sense that I want something and I'm going to do it. But primarily, if you think about hunger, I mean, that's a drive, and we need to have food to sustain us. So that's a little bit separate. But the bottom line is everything we do begins and ends in the brain, and so we have more conscious control over our drives when we pay attention to it. And I think that's the real lesson, is that we can't act on instinct all the time. If we did, we'd fall in love with everybody we saw, or we'd be in jail for something, trying to get something we couldn't have. And it really is about paying attention to what happens in the brain that we have, and understanding what's conscious, what's in our awareness, and what drives us.
So if you're in a long-term relationship and you want to get that dopamine going, can you trick your brain?
It's not even tricking. It's about spicing it up. The brain loves novelty, and it's novelty that drives the anticipation and the reward. So just as you change your old recipe, change what's happening in your love life.
All right. Good advice, Dr. Janet Taylor. Really interesting.